They know him. He's really a nice guy.
All right, first question. What the fuck you guys doing here? You have moderator? Right. Welcome.
So what we thought we were going to do is we're just going to jump straight into questions from you guys, because there's so many of you here and so many questions I'm sure that want to be asked. So if you guys just want to stick your hands up and we'll go question by question and get these guys to answer what you want to know. So who would go first? You dudes.
Tell us about Global Force, Jeff.
It's coming. We're going to start running shows in June. We just announced last week. We partnered with minor league baseball in the States, and we've announced, I think, 10 dates, and we've probably got 15 more. Probably by the end of the year, we'll run 25. We go to the Orleans Arena in July, start the tapings there. July, August, and October are the dates, and we're going to be doing a roster reveal in early May. And I know that is the million-dollar question, so stay tuned. We've got a lot of exciting things coming up.
Coming to the UK?
Absolutely.
Who's next? The back there, dude.
That will ask me a question. What was your favourite match that you're not part of?
To everyone?
Yeah, to
everyone. Why not? Let's get through.
Bra and panties match.
Doesn't follow that. I think probably Hogan Andre. That was a big one, you know. Anything with Andre is always a big one.
Not touching that one at all. I would have to say, but just look around and see a handful of NWO shirts, more than a handful, actually, that I don't get any percentage off of anymore. But I would have to say Bash at the Beach, you know, when Hulk Hogan turned, that was, for obvious reasons, kind of a big deal. But there was so many of them, it's hard to really answer.
Go on there.
Oh gosh, it really there's too many. Any Shawn Michaels match, I think he is bell to bell, maybe the best ever.
Fair enough. I'll argue with that. Yeah.
Who's your favourite wrestler that's currently on the roster? Like the newer people?
Who's my favorite wrestler? Or who's our
Yeah, all of those, like
favorite wrestler on what roster?
on like the current one. Like who's doing it now?
Out there right now?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I'll go first. John Cena, you know, the guy. When you look at it from what he's done, his body of work, his quote-unquote run over the last 10 plus years, he's really pulled the wagon, and WWE is the standard bearer, for better or worse. They got 80 or 90% market share around the globe. So what he's done, and you've got to really tip your hat to that guy, regardless if you love him or hate him. He's an MVP.
Myself, I like Bray Wyatt. I think he's kind of a throwback to the golden age. He could be out there wrestling with Junkyard Dog and Ultimate Warrior. He fits right into that group, so I like Bray.
Cesaro's the best up there. I think from being in the ring with him and also from watching him, I'm like totally impressed with Cesaro, and so I guess he's probably my favorite talent there now.
I think as far as young guys coming up, I like Seth Rollins quite a bit, and I'd have to also agree with Jeff, you know, because I look at things a little differently, but perhaps than most of you do. But I can't help but just respect the hell out of a guy that I know works as hard and is committed to the industry, both what you see on television and what you never see on television. I just got to tip my hat to John on that one.
Yeah, so guys, obviously you've all been involved in different storylines in wrestling there. What's been your favourite storylines which you've been involved in? Or angle?
Yeah, for me it was with Andre the Giant. You know, I was able to knock Andre out, and that elevated me from a mid-card guy to a main event guy. And of course, that wouldn't happen if Andre didn't let it happen. And you know, it was kind of one of the high points of my career, if not the high point.
I'd have to go with bringing ECW back on WWE's stage, but I really don't even consider that a storyline because it was just, it happened, it was real, you know what I mean? So, but by far, that was one of the most motivating parts of the WWE run for me was, you know, first it was bringing ECW back just for one night. And that was awesome, and that became an annual thing. And then we were bringing it back as a third brand. That was, for me, and I know for all the ECW fans, that was incredible, for sure. And that's why that match with Cena will always stand out for me, not just because of that match and winning the WWE title. That crowd was a unique, one night out of my whole career kind of atmosphere, you know, that crowd put off, and then it was because I was bringing ECW back, and that's what that night was about.
Was that the best night of your career?
It would have to be, you know what I mean? It was definitely the moment, and like I said, all that momentum, because I honestly, I mean, it came across like a storyline, but it was such a shoot for me. That night for me was about all of us, everybody that, you know, had that ECW spirit that wouldn't let it die, and it was us telling Vince, you know, no, you can't bury it, you know, it's here to stay. And so that night, in moving forward from that, I knew moving forward that that was gonna happen. The whole playing ground of the industry changed. Now there's a third brand, and it was Extreme Championship Wrestling, which of course has always been my best showcase.
Any more storylines, boys?
Go ahead, Jeff.
No, go ahead.
I wasn't a wrestler, so it's harder for me to answer this question. The things that I did in the ring were just kind of one-off, momentary things. But I'll call it a storyline that I had with Stone Cold Steve Austin. It was pretty fun because of the history associated with it, and taking, you know, a little bit of reality and history and kind of turning it into, you know, something that's current and what the fans really wanted to see. And then to be able to get in the ring with Steve in Montreal was pretty exceptional. So that would have to be right up there, I think, for me personally.
Oh gosh,
Too many again.
there's a lot. I mean, I'm just sitting here trying to think. All right, the Moondog thing was real in a lot of ways. Nobody in this room probably remembers that, but it was hardcore before hardcore. But as going through the years, and Rob touched on something about being real. Just a couple of years ago, the Jeff Jarrett, Kurt Angle, Karen Angle saga at that time, it was really intense.
Scary, actually, from my perspective. We followed Jeff around with a mop and a bucket.
Well said.
Next question, guys. Let's go to you, mate.
Question for Eric. What was the most satisfying time you fired someone?
I cannot wait to hear this.
You know, and I know none of you will believe this, because the myth of what an evil ass I was far exceeds the reality, at least in context of who I fired, because I really didn't fire very many people. In fact, if I were to go back, somebody asked me earlier today, you know, if you could go back and do anything over again, what would it be? Well, first of all, the list is about 1,000,000 miles long, but I think being a little more careful about letting people stick around that should have been was probably one of my weak points. So I really didn't fire that many people, with one exception that I just remember vividly because I enjoyed it so much, and I actually enjoy the memory of it as much as I did doing it, and it was a honky-tonk man. I just, to this day, I get like warm, kind of fuzzy chills thinking about firing that idiot.
If you weren't a wrestler, what job would you have?
What's that for?
Everyone.
Everybody?
I didn't hear the question.
If we weren't a wrestler, what would our job be? I grew up, loved to play any sport I could possibly do. And I've been asked this question before. So if I could coach and do it well, I would love to be a coach of any sport.
Well, you guys have an answer in mind? I actually was not considered an athlete at all growing up. I was a goof off and didn't know I was considered athletically gifted till far into my career. I actually was a bit of a nerd, and I think I was supposed to be smart. I think I was supposed to do something using my brain. Yeah, and I like to write. And I suppose if I hadn't decided to be a wrestler, I would have followed that path. And I still imagine I will transition over. I have so many writing projects. I just lack the dedication to make that accessible to you. But it's all up here.
Porno star. I think during my college days in the summer, I was a fireman. I think I enjoyed being a fireman. A lot of action, something new every day, a fulfilling job.
I grew up, and by the way, good question. Nobody's ever asked me that before in a context like this. I grew up wanting to be a veterinarian, and it wasn't until halfway through my first, and probably through my first year of college, that I realized that probably wasn't going to happen for me. So the two-part answer: I would have liked to have been a veterinarian as I was younger. I would have probably ended up doing what I was doing before I got into the wrestling business, which was sales. I was a sales manager for a food processing company, and that was really what I was good at. So in all likelihood, I would have been in sales in some capacity.
What do you want to do, little man? Football.
Soccer.
The wrestling business is run in a really different way now to how it was when you all broke in. So if you were young guys breaking in now, how do you think you would find it compared to how it was when you all started up? Did you be the success that you became if you were coming in a new system?
Me personally, everything evolves, and of course wrestling has evolved quite a bit. So I don't know if like my character would work so well nowadays, you know, with the hoe and the board and all. I think now the trends for more guys flying, more acrobatic type athletic moves. So I don't know if I'd be successful now as I was back then.
That's such a hard question to really wrap your head around, because it's such a different world now. When you think about who we had to look up to, who we were inspired by, and what the standards were back then compared to now, with the young guys, they had us. They were inspired by us. And I mean, we're not all even in the same generation. I was inspired by him and those guys, you know. And I mean, there was no such thing is MMA, and now you're born into this world where it's already a thing. I used to tell people that I was a kickboxer, they didn't know what that was. You had to explain what kickboxing was, and then, you know, if MMA was around, I'm sure I would have totally been driven to go that route, because I was into, you know, challenging myself, and I had that hunger to prove myself. But so that's why it's so hard, because now the standards have been, they are what they are now, and the world is what it is now. So coming in now, any of us would come in differently, you know what I mean? Like, ready for today. And then I think what got us to reach our goals was the passion, the dedication, and that wouldn't have changed. So we would have adapted to today's world, but we don't have to now.
Do you think it's harder to break now, or was it harder to break back then?
I personally think that now there's a lot more fans in the business. Like, the one way it was so much different back then with the old school. By the time I was in the ring, I already couldn't act like a mark. You know what I mean? I wasn't allowed in the dressing room until I could act like I belonged there. And now it's not like that. Now, you know, a wrestler gets a tattoo of the date that the writers decided to put the strap on her, I hear, you know, and things like that just weren't allowed back then. So that's another way that it's changed so much. So I think I kind of think it's easier, because now fans that watched us that might not have the old school training that we did are running shows, or they're you know, wrestling in the shows, and there's a lot more. It used to be so much more closed door society, so I think it's easier now.
He just said something a second ago. Obviously, I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, so that's the music city. No, but there is thousands of musicians that come to town, and anybody can get on stage with a guitar and say they're a singer. Are they good or not? No. And so, yeah, it may be easier or easy to get in, but I still believe to this day, and all four of us have different stories, but at the end of the day, we've all sacrificed family time, you name it, whatever it may be. We've all got a passion, and we've all got talent. And at the end of the day, whether you were broken in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever year you break in, if you've got talent and you've got a real passion, I mean, I'm going to disagree with Jim. He was played NFL football, incredible athlete. No matter what, if he would have broke in 2012 with his ability and passion and charisma, he would have adapted. So I really think no matter what year you break in, the two things that separate you from anybody else is talent and passion. And if you don't have both, go get another job.
So would you say they're the most important things in the sporting world, probably, if you were trying to break through, if you want to be a footballer, if you don't have talent, you don't have passion?
Yes, you really got to love it. I mean, Eric, he stated earlier, he wasn't a wrestler, but God, what a businessman he is. He was Vern Gagne's coffee getter.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then he ran the most successful wrestling business in the world at one time. But he had a passion for it. But also, that passion will only get you so far. He was a great broadcaster, great play-by-play. So I think you have to have both.
From you as a boss, Eric, what would you say is like, what do you look for in someone? Is it the same thing, your talent and passion?
You know, it's hard to define. It's an intangible. If someone walks into the room, sometimes or they walk into the ring, sometimes it's a little tiny subtle things, the way they carry themselves, or the way they look into the camera, or the way they react naturally to someone instead of trying to memorize every single thing that they're saying. They feel their story and their reaction. They feel it, and when you feel it, you can see it, you can feel it differently. So what I'm looking for, what I used to look for, is more of an intangible than anything else.
Is there one person that you can remember that you maybe hired, that went in, saw you, you knew it was going to be huge?
I really can't, because I've never really felt that way about, especially someone that was new, that hadn't really been to the dance before. There's been times that I hoped, someone that would make it to that level that either did or didn't, but there was nobody that I've ever laid eyes on and I said, that person's going to be a star. I wish I had that ability. I honestly, as much as I'm enjoying being here right now, if I had that skill, I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be at the beach throwing coconuts at tourists, counting my money.
Eric, if you were in modern day on Raw or SmackDown, you could make the NWO again, which 3 stars would you pick out of that roster, current roster?
Oh, I couldn't even, I don't even allow my brain to think that way. Sorry.
Right.
If you could choose your perfect tag team partner, who would you choose? Brett all of them.
Sabu.
For me, Sergeant Slaughter.
Too many again?
The question is, who would I choose?
Robert Fuller.
Tag team partner.
Tag team partner. Oh gosh. Actually, Kurt. That was been a unique tag situation.
What are your thoughts on NXT and who do you think will be most successful on the main roster?
I didn't hear that. I'm sorry.
NXT, who's going to be successful?
Yeah, what are your thoughts on NXT?
I've been a huge Fergal Divot fan from way, way, way back. Nothing but money.
Yeah, myself, I don't watch too much wrestling nowadays. I joke, I said that'd be like a butcher watching him cut meat on his day off. 36 years, I don't watch a lot.
Ditto.
A lot of people are asking me what I think about Adrian Neville. Of course, that dude's awesome. I've known him for a while. I wrestled him here in Europe somewhere a few years ago when he was called Pac, and he wasn't quite so jacked up. But I saw him. I saw footage of him doing a 450 off the guardrail to the floor like a week ago. Those are they can have those standards. You know what I mean? Like when it becomes about always trying to outdo the high spot, someone's now doing a 450 with a corkscrew springboard to the floor, and I saw that, and that's, you got to have more than that, but he totally does, and he's going to be a big star.
We're going to have to jump in with the last question. Dude, your hand was straight up.
This is for Mr. Bischoff. Just a quick question, were you given the heads up when DX were doing the invasion, and what was the atmosphere like backstage?
I was not given a heads up. I wish I would have been given a heads up and had the time to think about what was going on, because I didn't really hear about it. I was literally in the ring. I had an IFB on in my ear. I was in the ring, and I had my director telling me what was going on backstage. So I was kind of reacting in the moment. Had I, of course I have the luxury of 20/20 hindsight, so I can make myself sound really, really smart. But I think, even reflecting back to the way I used to do things back then, had I had 10 minutes to think about it, I would have let them in, because it would have been phenomenal television. I wouldn't have been worried. They wouldn't have done anything too stupid, and we wouldn't have done anything too stupid. But just the fact that they were coming in and they would have been on the show would have, A, taken the steam out of what they ended up doing very, very successfully, and B, it was just been awesome television to see that happen.
Are you guys all sticking around at your tables now, afterwards? Yeah. So guys, that's all we've got time for here now. So
I'm
let's
just
give
going
a
to
round of
ask
applause.
one last thing. Gentlemen, before you go, we've got this little auction going on with Jesse and Sean later, so I just wondered, would you be kind enough to maybe put some autographs on that